and I'm like, okay, so I've got like 30 seconds. Anyways, guys, welcome to another edition of Real Talk. Today, it's a Friday, and I am always here, and I'm like so thrown out. Thank you, Anisha. She's like, oh, here's you. So, what are we talking about today? We're having a really interesting topic today, actually. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about biracial identity. I think I've had a lot of these conversations actually in the last like couple weeks with regards to some of the guests that I've had. I know I had Cheyenne Gold, and she was here, and we were talking about brown girl culture. And today we're going to be talking about biracial identity and, just identity, culture, and heritage in general. Today my guest is someone of Chinese-Trinidadian heritage. And her outward appearance would not suggest that she is someone who is from the Caribbean. I have had my own slew of experiences when it comes to dealing with a little bit of racism when it comes to the color of my skin or the way I look. I've had always, like, over the years, I've had people who have asked me, what's your background? Where are you from? You look so exotic. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And I take it as a compliment, obviously. I'm like, okay. I enjoy, actually, people can never know where I'm from. A lot of people assumed, like, from Guyana. Some people have actually asked me if I'm from India, and I'm like, I feel like I have a mixture of all of these things. My parents are from Trinidad, but I've got my great-grandfather and my ancestors are all from India, so I've got a little bit of everything when it comes to that. And I haven't even actually really figured out what I could have more. I just don't know, because I've never done one of those DNA like ancestry tests, and I really do. I want to do one. Maybe I'll do one and I'll share the results on the show. We don't know, but I'm really interested in finding out a little bit more about that, because I know that while my family doesn't really kind of even know their own history sometimes, and like my parents can only tell me like so much when it comes to where our great grandparents were from in India, where they grew up, but it'll tell us a little bit about our lineage and where we've come from and who we know, and just a little bit about our culture and history. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm really excited. Today I have on the show, her name is Danielle, and she is a director, writer, and producer of a documentary that she's making called But You're Not Black, which I think is amazing. When she reached out to me, I was like, this is something we definitely have to talk about, because I myself people have told me that I fall in the black category, and I was like, I do? But I don't really ever see it. I'm just like, because I would say that I'm a brown girl. But again, because you're from the Caribbean, they tell you different things. Anyways, we're going to have a really good conversation about that today. I'm going to bring Danielle on the show, and please stay tuned. Make sure that if you have any questions, that you send us comments on Twitter and hashtag RealTalkMyTCNTV. My name is Alyssa Mahadeo, journalist and community reporter, and I dedicate my time to searching for the stories that matter the most. Positive, uplifting, and inspiring stories that spotlight the challenges and obstacles we conquer to become the people who we are today. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of all the fairy tale lifestyles that people seem to be living on social media. Girl, you did not wake up like that. I'm interested in the genuine connections, the honest opinions, and the real uncut version of your true self. This show is about keeping it 100% real, deconstructing who we are and what we're all about. Join me as we sit down with individuals to discuss the personal struggles, the many challenges, and the moments that define us on this journey of self-discovery. Let's be real, life isn't fair and people make mistakes, but every opportunity is a learning experience. Let's discover the truth together right here on Real Talk.
Inside my house, what the fuck? No, we could move nothing. I lost everything up. Balls, I get to take off nothing, just a few pieces.
Welcome back. You're watching Real Talk, and I'm your host, Alyssa Mahadeo. Today on MyTCN TV Real Talk, we have Danielle Ayow, and she is here, and she's going to be talking a little bit about her upcoming documentary. I know that you've done a little bit on this documentary already.
Yeah.
You're kind of expanding upon it now, and it's called But You're Not Black. So you are the writer, director, and producer of this documentary.
I am. I decided to basically destroy myself for a good year and a half. And took on every role I possibly could.
Right,
So-
because don't you also have like a full-time job that you do and also probably like part-time gigs that you do as well?
I do.
Yeah, so tell
I
us
do.
a little bit about yourself and your background and, what you do.
So I'm Chinese-Trinidadian,
Mm-hmm.
hence why I wrote this documentary. And in my average life, I'm an actor and a comic.
Mhm.
In Toronto, so I've done a bunch of stuff. I've done Second City. I've done a bunch of different shows. I've done stand up everywhere. So it was just not a natural step, but it was relatively easier. We'll
Okay.
say, than the
Was
average
acting
person.
something that you were interested in before?
You know what? It was something that just happened to me. Like I grew up in Scarborough, and we had
me too.
all Trinidadians grow up in Scarborough.
I think that's where we start.
Yeah. But like we had 2 art schools, right? You had Cardinal Carter and you had Wexford. And so when I was going into high school, Cardinal Carter was a new school. So it was all shiny and new. So when you went to visit the high schools, you're like, this is really, really nice. I want to go to this school. I don't even know what it's about.
Yeah,
it's
but I'm like, I gotta be here.
yeah, it was like the nicest school to go to. And so I auditioned and I got in, and then I decided not to go because none of my friends were going to that school. So I went to the neighborhood high school. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'm good at this. And then I just kind of picked it up, and it just went on for many, many more years.
So were you born here or you were born in Trinidad?
I was born here.
Okay, so you're born here.
Yeah.
So, and you said your parents are Chinese.
Yes.
They obviously live in Trinidad.
They live here now.
Okay, but they used to live in Trinidad,
Yes.
right? So when did they immigrate from Trinidad then?
So they were there until my mother was 21. So she was born and raised
Okay.
there. And it was all around the 70s that my grandparents and all my uncles and my aunts kind of slowly migrated to Toronto or Montreal. And, there was such a large population of Chinese West Indian in Toronto that I grew up with. I grew up with all my cousins. I grew up with all my aunts and uncles around me, and they all had West Indian accents, and they all looked like me. So when I was growing up, I was like, this is normal. Aren't we the majority in Trinidad? And it just was not true.
Yeah.
It wasn't true, and I didn't know that as a child.
I mean, you can't. You're very ignorant to the things of the world as a
Yeah.
child, yes.
And even when I played Caravana, one of my extended relatives, she organized the section in the mass camp.
Yeah.
So she filled it with all of her relatives and all of our mutual friends and everything. So then I still didn't kind of get it until maybe I was a little bit older and I was a teenager, and then I started talking to more people, and every time I told people what my background was, I was getting all these kinds of weird responses. But you're not black. You don't look mixed. And it just got, it eventually got on my nerves quite a bit.
Both of your parents probably look Chinese,
Yeah.
right? And so your grandparents are from China, or?
My grandparents are from China. They came over. This is a weird one. I don't know exactly what age they were because everybody kind of fudged their documents
Yep.
coming over. So they're supposedly supposed to be 18. They could be 13. They
Yeah.
could be 15.
Well, yeah.
And they don't even remember their own ages.
Yeah.
But they look pretty young, so I have a feeling they're probably 13.
So I've never really heard about how the Chinese ended up in Trinidad.
Yes.
That's a very interesting story to me because, I mean, I still didn't even understand this when the Indians came over and then they ended up in Trinidad as well. It was like, I understand that they were all fleeing the country because of the British and the rule, and like they ended up in Trinidad because they were all slaves, and again, they were lower class. So that's how they ended up. And then the Africans kind of came from Africa. I mean, Trinidad is right there, so it's not really that hard to understand. But I was like, the Chinese. to me, it was like, how did the Chinese end up in the Caribbean?
So we actually came over, the first wave, we came over the same way East Indians did. We came over as indentured laborers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not exactly clear why they didn't adhere to that program so much of indentured laborers. So it didn't extend as long as East Indian indentured laborers did.
Yeah.
It only lasted like a couple of years. And then they were just kind of like, they scrapped the program and they took more people from East India.
Yeah.
But then since there were people already there who had stayed there, they were just kind of enticing more and more people to come over just because it was like they had more businesses and it was an up-and-coming country. So there's just more opportunity. And they were themselves fleeing their own war in China against the Japanese too.
Okay, very interesting. I honestly, I have never really looked into that part of the history. I mean, I barely looked into my own history, so then there's that. But like, same thing, I know that, so being Chinese, being someone of Chinese-Trinidadian background, there's probably like, there's two different cultures though that are being married together. I mean, Trinidadian culture is very like crazy when you think about it by itself.
Yeah.
And then I can't speak to Chinese culture, but how did those two things fit together in your childhood?
Horribly. It was just horrible. It was like the worst. It's the worst mixture you could ever have. No, that's not fair to say. But they're completely polar opposites. Because Trinidadians are loud and we're boisterous and we're rowdy and we love music and...
I told you to take off your phone and I left mine on.
It's all good.
Go ahead.
And, you know, Chinese are a little bit more reserved. But you know what? Doing all my research and learning all about family and at the base of it all, like at the foundation and core of it all cultures, we have our good, we got our bad, you know, but we all have the same stories.
Yep. We
all have the same stories of travel. We all have the same stories of family. It just manifests itself differently. But it was weird growing up. I grew up surrounded by Chinese West Indians, which I was very fortunate to do. Unfortunately, it led me to this position where I feel so confused about my own heritage.
Yeah.
But now as an adult living in Toronto, where I'm not as surrounded as I was in, say, Scarborough or Mississauga or even Brampton, it's challenging. It's challenging.
So what kind of prompted this conversation? I'm sure everyone kind of used to ask you when, like, you probably tell them about your background, they were like, but you're not black, kind of thing. And then, you know, kind of what drove you to decide to explore this idea further?
It was always something that I was very interested in. And the opportunity presented itself when the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival, they put out a pitch contest that basically said, come and tell, you know, your story about cultural diversity in Canada and what it means to you. And so I was like, okay. So I entered that and I got in. And so I started working on it a little bit more. And I just realized with the political climate as it is right now, we need to tell these stories. We have to get our voices out there because it's not cool what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Simple as that. It's not great.
Does it ever irritate you when people ask you where you're from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
What's your like knee-jerk reaction when people ask you that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know exactly if I have a quick comeback for that. But it's just that...
But you probably get a little bit irritated.
Well, I think it's irritating because, like, we live in Canada. It's a multicultural place.
Yeah.
Everybody, you know, you've got tons and tons of generations that are born here from immigrants, but are born in Canada. So why you have to ask me where I'm from?
Yeah. Like, why is that your business kind of thing?
Why is that your business? Like, I'm from Scarborough.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it's worse, too, because you were born here in Toronto. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like you came from Trinidad and now you've immigrated here, so people are asking you kind of about that. But then they want to dig deeper because then I'm sure they obviously assume that you're Chinese first.
Yeah.
And then when you kind of give them a little bit more, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm Chinese, but I'm also... Do you ever do that or no?
Oh no, I do. I usually just go in and say I'm Chinese-Trinidadian.
And they probably just look at you like, what?
Yeah, it'll take a couple seconds and then they'll do all their follow-up questions. But it's important to me to say that I'm both.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to, I've always been very proud of both my heritages. And I don't really want to play into people's assumptions and say, well, I'm just Chinese. You know, just so I can avoid the strife. I'm like, unfortunately, I'm going to take it on because that's just my personality. But it's definitely annoying, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I feel you. I understand. So we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna continue this conversation on, again, biracial identity, because it's a very interesting topic. I mean, I've got my own stories that I could go on for like 5 days about. But we'll come back and we'll revisit that in a second. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Real Talk on my TCN TV. Guys, welcome back. We have Danielle Ayow, and she is here, and she's talking about her culture, her identity, and what it means to be Chinese-Trinidadian. And again, I feel like this is something a lot of our audience could potentially relate to. I mean, since we've been doing this show, we've had a lot of conversations about things like this, where it comes to race, culture, identity, and your heritage, and just really figuring out who you are. And I think it's kind of an open conversation now that people are having more and more, because they're interested in discovering who they are. They're like, if I can understand where I'm from in the world, or what my background, my traditions, and things are, like what my ancestors used to do, like what we did as people, I'd be able to understand myself a little bit better and understand how to integrate that into my overall identity. So today we're talking a little bit about Chinese and Trinidadian culture specifically. And I'm really interested in hearing from you about what it feels like when you don't feel accepted by either of the cultures that you're a part of, that you know are a part of yourself.
Yeah. It was weird when I go into like a Chinese environment, we'll say, I don't necessarily feel super connected because I don't really know the traditions that well. I don't really celebrate the traditions or any of the holidays. And then on top of that, I don't speak a dialect. So they kind of look at you and...
It's probably like so frowned upon that you don't speak a dialect.
A little bit. Like it's like shame. It's like shame, you know? They throw shade at you. They throw shade at your parents because your parents didn't their
teach
job.
You, yeah.
You know what I mean? And it hurts. You know what I mean? It really hurts. And you feel this huge sense of disappointment on you going into those communities. And then on the other side, it's like I'm just not the right color. You know what I mean? I stick out like a sore thumb going to West Indian events, but I know it's part of me. Yeah. But I'm definitely the odd man out. But something I definitely felt this year, more so than any other year, especially at Caravana this year, was that there's a new wave of Chinese immigrants that are coming to Trinidad. So they are not the generation, they are not like my parents, for example, who are born and raised there. And so a lot of them come out in Toronto, they go to Caravana and they go watch, and it's very clear that there is there's very clearly a divide. They are tourists looking at a parade.
Mm-hmm.
They're not participants.
Mm-hmm.
And going there this year, there was a part of me that was like, I don't want to be seen as a tourist. And it was such a stupid thought. It was such a stupid thought of me. But it's like, I didn't want to be seen as a tourist. I wanted to be seen as something that I'm celebrating something that's part of my culture.
Mm-hmm. And people kind of just are like, oh, look at this girl in here. She thinks she's Caribbean. She can be, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah.
They think you're like culturally appropriating their culture.
Which I think is ridiculous.
Which is a little ridiculous. Like, I understand it given this climate that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always kind of felt like that. You get a little bit of side eye. You get a little bit of...
It's a lot of judgment. I always find it's a lot of judgment when it comes to things like that, only because people don't fully accept you. Even though it's something you might identify with.
Yeah.
And then you always feel like there's this part of you that can't live up to their expectations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And it's the sense of like possessiveness, right? Like this is my parade.
Mm-hmm.
This is my China.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not 100% there or 100%, Chinese, then you're kind of sitting in limbo constantly.
So how does one now, like, kind of navigate that spectrum where one side doesn't accept you and the other side doesn't really want you either? Like, how does that kind of work out? And I'm not saying that that's your case, but I feel like for a lot of other, biracial people that it kind of comes to that.
You know what? There's no answer. There's absolutely no answer to this right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely getting more prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
Because immigration it's not a straight jump. It's not like you came from your country of race and then you're in Canada or you're in the States now. Like there's so many little stepping stones that you touched upon that have affected how you were brought up, how you were raised, and what you were taught. So I think if anything, it's going to get worse. I think more people are going to experience this kind of crisis in culture.
Mm-hmm. So how are you affected by like other countries, like other Asian countries, then, like, and their people? Is that ever addressed? Like,
in what respect?
So I know you come from a Chinese background.
Yeah.
Right? So the Japanese people, the Korean people, like Nepalis, like any like other kind of country in Asia, like how do they receive you?
Well, people think I'm Korean to begin with.
Okay.
So I think I'm treated pretty well by Korean people.
They're like, oh, she's one of us.
Yeah, because I look Korean.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't experience so much scrutiny necessarily from Chinese people or from other Asian countries. I don't know if because we have so much migration amongst there that they're kind of a little bit more accepting.
Is there like also like, I don't know how it kind of is, but is there like a mixture too of like different between the Asian cultures?
There is.
Yeah.
There's
probably So that's also probably why. So they're just like, yeah, this is fine. This is kind of normal for us.
A little bit.
Yeah.
It's still kind of weird because I'm not the right color, but it's a little bit less of a fight, we'll say.
Okay.
Like I think the most scrutiny I've ever faced was in Europe.
Okay.
And
tell me about your experience there.
I had a guy in Italy who asked me where I was from.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'm visiting from Canada. And he's like, well, where are you really from? And I'm like, I was born in Canada. I'm like, I'm not going any further than this for you.
Yeah.
But he just kept on digging, and
pushing, yeah.
He's like, where are you originally from? And I did not even, in this case, I was like, I'm not going to say Trinidad because I don't think you're going to know where it is. I don't want to even talk about that. And eventually, he was just going and going. I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm eventually from China. But eventually, roots back there. But that bothered me. That got under my skin a lot.
And you know what's funny is I've actually had a very similar experience because I went to Italy as well, and there was this thing. Sorry, we have construction, so if anyone can hear that, that's just there's construction going on in the offices today. But I had a very similar experience myself in Italy, where I was a part of a group of like people from all over the world. So everyone was kind of there representing their country. I was there representing Canada. So if someone sees a brown girl show up and she's representing Canada, we have all of the questions.
Yeah. And it's ridiculous because if it was a Caucasian person, they wouldn't be like, yeah, but where are you really from?
Yeah. It's true. So that's what I was being asked a lot of the times. They kind of looked at me and they were like, "You're from Canada?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm from Canada." It was like I was born and raised there. And they were just like, "But where are you really from?" I'm like, "I mean, if you must know, my parents are from Trinidad." And then they're just like, "But you don't look Trinidadian." And I'm like, "This is a whole other conversation we're having now."
Yeah.
They're like, "Are you sure you're not from India?" I'm like, "Yeah, my ancestors are from India." And I was like, "I have family probably from India as well." And I'm just like, "But I don't understand why it's relevant right now because I'm here representing my country of Canada." So
Oh my gosh,
I
so
understand.
frustrating.
I understand that conversation where it becomes a whole thing where you're just like, "Why am I explaining myself to you?"
That's so frustrating.
Yeah.
You know what? Something that I kind of discovered with this whole process, aside from the fact that people can be really possessive about their culture, it's like I think I've also realized how much bias I have against my own cultures as well. Because when you grow up in that kind of environment where you feel like you're in limbo, you kind of have a little bit of resentment towards both sides
Yeah.
for not really wanting you in a way.
That plays into the same question where I asked, like, I mean, how does it feel when neither culture kind of wants you?
You know, it's difficult, but then yeah, you get resentful.
Yeah.
Which is really the wrong answer and the wrong response to this thing. But growing up, you know, I think you also decide where you kind of want to align yourself based on the political and social climate that you grew up in. So when I grew up, and there was a lot of Chinese people moving into Scarborough and to Toronto, and they were taking over a lot of businesses. That's when like Pacific Mall was being built and all that stuff. And you know, there's a little bit of anti-Chinese sentiment because all these people were coming in, and you know, they didn't speak English, and they were taking all your businesses. You didn't want to be aligned with that, and you were trying your very best to prove that you weren't.
Yeah.
That you weren't that.
I always find that, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this after the break, but I always find that it's because, as women especially, we can't measure up to their standard of beauty.
Oh yeah.
That's a huge thing, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about that. So we're gonna take one more quick break, and we're gonna come back and continue this conversation. Watching Real Talk.
Oh, flood inside my house. What the fuck? Dog, we couldn't move nothing. I lost everything. Balls, I get to take out that in just a few pieces.
Welcome back. You're watching Real Talk. I'm your host, Alyssa Mahadeo, and today on the show, we are talking a little bit about biracial identity and culture. It's been a really great conversation so far. I mean, I think it's just about exploring this idea itself and then having an open conversation about it, because I don't think enough people are really like sitting here and thinking about it. I think we have these thoughts. We sit down and we think about these things to ourselves, but it's very hard to vocalize. Because it's like, does anyone really understand where I'm coming from when I'm talking about these things?
But you know what? I learned that there's so many. There's so many. When I started reaching out to the community, there's so many people who experience this. But it's weird because, like, in Trinidad, I didn't necessarily feel that kind of divide when I was there. You know, you obviously do hear, you know, stories because there's limericks about Chinese people in Trinidad. But I didn't feel that kind of scrutiny that I was the wrong color. The way I feel it in Canada.
Which is very interesting. It's a very interesting point that you bring up because I never really thought about that, but it makes sense only because, again, people are trying to compare you to what the standard should be. And I think that's what it is. I think even with the communities that are kind of here, when you think about even those like ads for like beauty, like when you think about what those models and things look like, and if you don't like look like the perfect Chinese woman or you don't look like the perfect Indian woman, people are just like, well, then you're not really Indian, or you're not the right color, like you're too dark or you're too fair, or you're like, you know. And I'm just like, but why does that matter?
I think it's ridiculous. I am too dark to be Chinese.
Really. And you know what? And I understand that only because I know what Chinese people consider the right color.
Yeah, like they like to be really, really fair.
Like the color of our TCN logo.
Exactly. And I am too fair, really, to be West Indian. Well, comparatively, that's also because I don't spend as much time in the sun as my family that's down there. Obviously, my family that's down there is so much darker than I am. But I'm kind of like this nice middle ground.
Yeah. And honestly, it's a great complexion to have. I have one of my cousins is actually, she's Trinidadian American.
Okay.
So she's a white girl to us. When we see her, we're just like, when she's hanging out with us in Trinidad and we're going around places, people are just like, who is this white girl with you guys? Like, did you adopt her? Because she doesn't look like our cousin. She doesn't look like part of our family. All of my cousins kind of like look a little bit like me. We all have the same kind of complexion, same kind of look. Whereas she looks a little bit different than everyone. She actually looks a lot different. And when they see this girl, they're just like, where'd you find this girl? Does she even know about things? Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I'm like, she's Trinidadian. I was like, her mother is Trinidadian. I was like, and it's funny too because when she goes out with her mom too, like her people are like, did you kidnap this child? Is she yours? Because she doesn't resemble her mother like that.
Right? Oh, that's really sad.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I mean, she doesn't care now because she's like, I'm over this. She's like, I know who I am, and I accept that I'm this way. But I mean, it's funny because Indian people in Trinidad are always looking for a way to get fairer as well.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's not only the Chinese people, Indian people as well. And this kind of, I don't know where this comes from. I can't tell you exactly.
You know what, though? Does it stem from the fact that we were both British colonies?
Yes.
And so because the British were in power, that is the beauty standard. To be, the fairer you are, the more likely you are.
It's a power trip thing.
Yeah.
It's a power trip thing. And that is exactly where it comes from. Because we were both colonized by the British, the white people had power. So we automatically needed to be like them. And we were treated better if we had fairer skin.
Yeah.
Right? Also, it's also a symbol of, like, your heritage, like, your status in life as well. So a lot of, like, the richer you were, the fairer you were as well. It just made you look more expensive. As sad as that sounds.
Yeah.
The servants were farmers. They were out in
Yeah, we were always like, they were always out in the sun, so you were always like really, really dark. Your skin looked like leather because, right? Like you didn't take care of your skin the same way that you would if you were inside all day.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah. I just find it ridiculous that this whole color thing. I definitely understand it. Race is extremely important to know where you came from and to know how you appear to people. But it also shouldn't be, I don't think it should be a barrier. You can't be judging people by their skin color.
No, you can't.
You don't know where they're from.
Yeah. People aren't judging people based on their intelligence or the things they know anymore. People are just, yeah, you look like this, so this. I mean, there's even like that whole thing. There's that Instagram culture now too, as well, where we talk about how girls like filter their photos, they add brighteners on their photos, and they put like a million things. Like I was actually, huh? Yeah.
Oh.
Having all these conversations about how people are just kind of, they're changing their appearance to fit the ideal perfection.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why, like, when you don't fit with whatever that beauty standard is, which is, like, it's over here. It's not even, like, at anywhere where is normal. Because when you see these people in real life, they don't even look like their pictures.
No, they don't.
Right?
I'm pretty sure I don't.
No.
I'm pretty guilty of that. Sorry, guys. I am guilty of filters.
But I mean, filters are good to a point. But when you're changing like full appearance, it doesn't look the greatest because it's like now you're trying to conform to something else.
Have you seen like the chin tape?
Yes. Oh my god. Yes, I have seen those. Those are terrifying to watch.
But I don't understand how that. Like you can't go out like that. Like can't it be seen?
No, apparently people are going out like that too.
But you have like Scotch tape like around your chin.
They're using it like clear tape and they're like pulling up their chins to make it more angular.
Yeah.
And then also like they cover it with like layers of foundation and it's like 7 shades whiter than what your actual skin tone is.
That's just too much work.
Yeah. I mean like when you're going out you're looking like a geisha at that point.
Yeah. Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about some of the cultures and traditions that you grew up with. So kind of some of the things that your parents kind of brought you guys. Or do you have any siblings, by the way? I didn't even ask.
I do.
You.
I have 3 sisters.
Okay, so you have 3 sisters. So tell me about some of the cultures and traditions and things that things that your parents taught you growing up.
I think it's kind of fascinating because so there's 4 of us all together. There's 4 girls, and my father left when I was really young. Mm-hmm. So 2 of the girls grew up with my father, and the other 2, us 2, we didn't.
Okay.
And I think my father held on a lot more to his Trinidad, to his Chinese traditions.
Okay.
More so than my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom was, she'd take us to Carabana every year. She packs up a lunch, we go watch it for hours, and then we come home. And we go to fetes and all that stuff. And so I think when my dad wasn't in the picture, we embraced our Trinidadian roots way more. Mm-hmm. Than say my older 2 sisters mm-hmm. who did. Mm-hmm. And so they don't necessarily have so much of a fondness for Carabana or for
That's really interesting.
And things like that.
That's really interesting. And I mean, obviously your upbringing has a lot to do with that, right? Because once you're exposed to something all the time, you're more likely to lean to that too, right? And then you realize, okay, I actually really enjoy this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, this is mine. Like, this is considered, like, my people. And, you feel, like, that sense of community.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And, like, my aunt, she used to throw this fete at Wildwart Kingdom mm-hmm. when I was younger, and I used to volunteer. And it was just, like, I love that.
Yeah.
I loved that. And she still does it, mm-hmm. but I think it's actually, it's in Oakville still now. But a little bit too far for me. A little bit too far for me now.
Because no one's going to Oakville.
No one's going to Oakville for that. But I didn't feel connected to my Chinese roots also because our cuisine was so different too.
Yes.
Even the Chinese cuisine that we took from Trinidad,
the Hakka
food is different from like what you're seeing in Chinese restaurants.
Yeah, and I never realized either. When people used to tell me about Hakka food, I didn't understand how it was different mm-hmm. until I was like, no, Chinese food is actually a lot different than what Hakka is because Hakka is a mixture. It's supposed to be like a fusion type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, then I can't be Chinese because I don't know how to cook like that. My mom doesn't know how to cook like that.
Yeah.
And then we were growing up and we were cooking curry and we were cooking all these Hakka dishes. So it just never dawned on me. Like my only experience, we'll say true Chinese experience, which is not really Chinese, mm-hmm. please don't quote me on this, is like going to eat dim sum.
Okay. Yeah, and you're still like stretching with that one. Yeah.
I'm still stretching with that one. That one is not necessarily a tradition or anything that should be indicative of being Chinese.
I also learned that there's like a specific way that you're supposed to eat dim sum the other day, and it was like I've been eating dim sum wrong the whole life. Yeah.
What's the way?
You're not supposed. There's so many things. You're not supposed to like take a bite out of dim sum. You have to eat the whole thing whole. And then I don't think you're supposed to, like, there's this whole thing. I seen a video about it, trust me. We talked about this before.
Oh my gosh.
But we're going to take another quick break, and we come back. I want to talk a little bit about your documentary and some of the things that you kind of are going through on that journey right now. So we'll be right back. You're watching Real Talk.
Are you retiring smart? Make your home's equity work for you. With your home's equity and our 30 years of experience, the Retire Smart Properties team can help you achieve the quality of life you've always wanted. Our services are 360 degrees. We'll give you advice, take care of staging and selling, and help you find the perfect home and community to transition to. It's time to enjoy the retirement lifestyle you deserve. Visit our website today to learn how you can use your home to retire comfortably. The Retire Smart Properties team, powered by RE/MAX West.
Welcome back. You're watching Real Talk. I'm your host, Alyssa Mahadeo, and today on the show we're talking about culture and identity, specifically biracial cultures, and what it means to fit in with either or, and even what it feels like to not fit in. Because, I mean, it's very, very obvious sometimes that you find yourself in a room where you just don't feel like you belong.
Well, obviously I don't belong when I go eat dim sum because I just learned that I've been eating it wrong. So that's also a reason probably why they're so disappointed in me, not just the language.
But, and you know what, I don't think this disappointment is warranted because it's like, has anyone taught you how to do it properly?
Well, no, right? Because I don't even think my mom knows, because I'm pretty sure I've seen her take bites out of things, so obviously she's not doing it
unless
right
someone
either.
is teaching you exactly how to do things properly. They can't expect you to know. It's not like you're born with the knowledge.
No, but I think they just expect, with your race comes a certain level.
Because you were raised by Chinese parents, probably.
Yeah.
Right? So, in speaking about this conversation, you said you grew up with your mom who kind of instilled a lot of the Trinidadian kind of cultures into you. So you kind of grew up experiencing a lot of that. I mean, guys, if anyone knows Trinidadian culture, it's crazy. It gets crazy, it gets wild. We've got soca, we've got reggae, we've got fusion, we got so many things, and we're just loud people.
Well, what I thought was really fascinating is when I went to Trinidad in the summer, it was Destra's birthday?
Was it?
No. It was either her birthday or she got married. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But I think she got married and they made it an official holiday.
Yeah, because that's what happens in Trinidad.
Yeah.
Everything is a holiday.
Yeah.
I get
Which
so
I thought
upset
was great.
when I hear that my cousins will be like, oh yeah, today was a holiday. And I'm like, today is Monday. Like, people are supposed to be going to work today. They're like, no, wait, the government gave us a holiday. And I'm like, the soccer team didn't even win and they got a holiday.
Yeah, but, they took a lot to get there. So.
I'm glad for them, but I'm like, it's not like when Canada won that we got a national holiday.
But I think that is so amazing. So a fabulous Trinidadian singer gets married and you get a holiday. You get a national holiday. Like, we did not get a national holiday when Celine Dion got married. Like,
no, we don't get national holidays for anything. We have to beg for holidays now.
Yeah.
And I'm just, oh my god, we have a holiday? I didn't even, you don't even realize we have holidays at this point because you're just, so in awe by them.
Yeah.
Even when we got Family Day, I was like, they're giving us a holiday for our family? What?
But that's not even a federal holiday. So
no.
If you work for federal, you can't take it.
Yeah, and I've been told, I'm like, you can't tell me I can't take my holiday. People, I'm like, is the bank closed? Is the post office closed? I work for them today. But tell me, so growing up, obviously, you didn't have a lot of the Chinese, and you didn't learn a lot of the Chinese kind of cultures and traditions and stuff like that. But you were probably curious.
I knew it was part of me, but it wasn't, it's horrible to say, it wasn't super appealing.
Okay. Is it because maybe it's like a stricter culture? Stricter cultures and traditions?
It definitely is a stricter culture. And I guess it was also what I said earlier, where it was just like the social climate at that time was that all these people are coming in, they don't know how to speak English, they're cheap, they're taking over our businesses. All
the prejudice that you would kind of hear, yeah.
So then you didn't want to be that.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to lean more towards my Trinidadian roots because I had more fun. I had more fun when I was leaning towards my Trinidadian roots because I was going to fetes and I was going to Carabana and I was listening to music. And like the one real experience, I guess, we'll say, in terms of trying to embrace my Chineseness, was that my mom enrolled me in Mandarin classes, like a Sunday school kind of Mandarin class. And we show up on the first day, and it's taught in Cantonese.
Oh, no.
So, and my mom's like, well, I can't keep her here. She doesn't know Cantonese.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, she'll catch on. I'm like, how am I supposed to catch on to learn Mandarin if I can't learn, if I don't know Cantonese?
I don't know Cantonese.
So I've got to learn 2 languages in order to learn one. And I remember the teacher's like, no, keep her. She'll pick it up. She'll catch on. And I sat in that class. That was an hour class. And I cried for an hour.
I can see how that would be stressful.
And I think after that, I was like, nope, don't want to learn any Chinese dialect ever again. It just, and either way, I wouldn't have anybody to practice with.
You don't have anyone to practice with, right? So, because, does your mom speak?
No.
No, she doesn't, right? So that's the thing, like, if your parents don't, like, my parents tried to get us to learn Hindi.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I understand why we should learn Hindi. It sounds really cool, and I always thought it would be cool to know another language. My parents grew up though speaking English, with Trinidadian slang. So whatever slang I know, it's from my parents, and whatever English I know is also from my parents. And I'm just like, how do you expect me to learn Hindi now? So my Aja would come and like try and teach us Hindi, my grandfather, and I would look at the words and I would be able to read the words, but ask me if I understood what I was reading.
Yeah, like I don't know. There isn't really too much of a point.
And my friends weren't Indian, so it's not like I was speaking Hindi with them. And I was just like, no one's practicing this with me, and it's not like I need to really know this at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're learning all these terms. Okay, something I'm gonna admit, this is me being really, really stupid. There's a West Indian term.
Yeah.
That we have, and I didn't know that it wasn't like a common English term that everybody kind of uses. So I was saying it, and then my boyfriend the other day was like, what are you, like, you keep on saying this, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
Like, you know when your stomach's upset?
Yeah.
What do you say that you have?
You have Nara, yeah.
You have Nara, but you also have wind.
Yes, we also, yeah.
Like, I got wind.
Yeah.
And so I kept on saying that because I just thought it was a common
You know, I just learned
term.
something today. I actually know that was not something that people really... They say they have gas.
Yeah, they say they have
gas.
Yeah, they say they've got gas or they feel bloated, but I was like, I got wind. And
Yeah.
my boyfriend was like, what the hell do you mean you've got wind? Like, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I didn't know. I thought it was a common term.
That's like, because now when I'm going out with my friends or I'm going with anyone, like, I mean, thank God, like, a lot of my friends are kind of either, like, Jamaican or from St. Lucia, but when I was younger, and even, like, when I was talking to some people, and I used to say that we're going out liming, and people would just be like, what is liming? Like, do you get limes? And, like, and I was like, guys, this is the terminology for we're going to hang out, but we don't say that because it's lame. We say we're going to lime.
Yeah.
So, I really appreciate Trinidadian slang for that. I mean, I've actually learned so much more over the years, like, as I've gotten older.
There's so much. There's so much that I don't know. I only know like a very small portion, I think.
Don't worry, you'll learn them.
I'm gonna learn them.
You gotta go hang out at all the fests and you'll learn all of them. I want to talk a little bit before we like honestly lose time because we're gonna get so caught up. Your documentary.
Yes.
Where are you kind of now in that production process?
So we are entering our production phase for it. So we've shot in Trinidad already. So we're going to shoot 4 days in Toronto and 1 day in LA.
Okay.
Because we are going to go interview the former NBC executive Paula Williams-Madison.
Okay.
Who wrote Finding Samuel Lowe. And she talks about her culture because she is Black. And her ancestors are actually Chinese.
Okay.
And so she kind of has a little bit of the reverse. And she talks a lot about, embracing her Chinese roots and everything like that. So I'm pretty interested to interview her.
Oh, that sounds really cool. Yeah, like, I mean, that sounds like an amazing story to be. You want to hear a joke? When I was younger, people used to think I was Chinese. Because if I show you, like, any of my, like, baby pictures, I look like this little Chinese girl. Like, I don't look like my parents. I don't look like any of my family in these baby pictures. So people used to, like, see me when I was a baby and be like, is that your kid? Are you sure?
That is so... That's so ridiculous.
I know, it was so ridiculous, and I'm like, I still sometimes get into this. Like, people will ask me if I'm like Chinese, and I'm like, I don't know if I should be offended for Chinese people. Like,
I don't know. I'm not the best person anymore to like guess people's race or guess where people.
I'm never asking. Like, ask. The question is, yes, ask, but be polite about it.
Yeah, and then once they give you the answer, don't keep on pushing and pushing and pushing.
But don't question them. I'm sure that they know who they are.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's such a stupid question to ask somebody, but you're not black. It's like, I've looked in the mirror. Like, it's not like I've never looked in the mirror.
I know that my
before.
skin is not black, but I do probably have black in my genes.
It's just.
I was like, honestly, we were also talking about this. Like, it kind of comes up in biology when you think about it. I mean, like, it's like a whole other conversation we could have about. But where like people of two different races have when they have kids, right? And then their kids kind of have like dormant genes.
Yeah.
So like their kids now will have like traits that like people and I'm just like, you can't tell what people are. We're too mixed up now these days that you just can't tell where people are from, and you really shouldn't be disrespectful by asking them.
No, I agree. I agree.
So, guys, we have reached the end of another hour on Real Talk. Danielle, thank you so much for coming today and sharing your story. Guys, make sure that you like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you share our video and tune in again next week for another edition of Real Talk. We'll see you again.